Welcome to a brand new format for my Lunar Mansion guides. As of now, this video series is going to be produced 4 times a year, providing you all the talisman quality Lunar Mansion elections in 4 time zones around the world, 3 months at a time. The purpose of this change is twofold. First, it will free up time for me to produce other content, and second, it gives you more time to plan and visibility for the calendar ahead. Mansions tend to show up for several months in a row, and some elections are better than others. So now you'll be able to look ahead and make sure that you'll be using the best election available quarter at a time. And there are some other advantages to this new format that I'll be discussing in the next episode of the Postmugglism podcast as well, which will be out soon. An entire episode dedicated to working magic in the tropical lunar mansion system. All the planets being direct in the sky means that there are many more viable lunar mansion elections available in Q1 than there were in Q4. And this edition of the Lunar Mansion Guide is brimming with opportunities for all kinds of magical workings. Prosperity, love, protection, destruction, luck with hunting, driving away pests, and much, much more. Before we get into that, though, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel, and remember to turn on notifications. That way you'll always get notified when I put out new videos. And please, if you like this video, consider giving me a like for all my hard work here in the content mines. And if you're not already subscribed to my email newsletter, you might want to check out my website at www.postmugglism.com to see all of the other articles, podcast episodes, videos, and other content that I'm creating. And you can subscribe to my Substack there in the sidebar of my website to get all of this content sent directly to your inbox for convenience. Plus, despite feeling like I'm always talking about it, I keep hearing from people that they have no idea that in my day job, I'm a shamanic energy healer, or that my wife and I are putting on spiritual retreats here in the Mexican Caribbean, and that I have a really special ayahuasca retreat coming up this March 4 through 8 in the jungle near Cancun. If this is news to you as well, please do me a favor and check out what we've got going on here at the Sacred Serpent by visiting our website at www.sacredserpent.co. Thanks. In the description below the video on YouTube, you will find a table of contents with links to jump to one of the 4 time zones that I cover in this guide that's closest to you in the world. After the intro, just jump to that section with all the elections that are relevant to you. But remember to relocate any election that you decide to use to your exact location on Earth. Instructions for relocating elections can be found in a video that I link in the description, along with some other videos that may be very helpful if you're new to Lunar Mansion magic. And with all that out of the way, stay tuned for the Q1 2024 Lunar Mansion Guide in just a moment. In addition to the big change of not doing monthly Lunar Mansion videos anymore, but now doing quarterly Lunar Mansion videos, I'm also cutting out some of the repetitive fluff that I talk about in each of the episodes, like the lore for the Lunar Mansions, myths, the history, and so on. And I'm sticking to just the stuff that changes on a month-by-month basis. So like that's the time, the date, the astrological configuration, and so on. And so for those other details, well, first of all, I suggest that you get a copy of the Greer and Warnock edition of the Picatrix. That's your best source to go actually to the source material. And I'll include a link to the book on Amazon in the show notes and in the details of this presentation, which I also link in the show notes. But in addition to that, I'm also making little shorts, so kind of like 1 minute long videos that'll appear on YouTube and maybe TikTok and some other places that contain all of the basic details that you need to understand how to wrap your head around the Lunar Mansion and how to work in it, including things like the spirit of Lunar Mansion, the image that goes along with it, the various uses under the waxing and the waning moon, and so on. I've made a couple of those videos now to launch with this one, but I haven't been able to make one for all of the 28 Lunar Mansions yet, so please be patient with me. And in the meantime, if you have some kind of a question about how you might work a Lunar Mansion or one of the elections that I talk about in this video, then just hit me up on Twitter or at postmugglism@gmail.com. And stay tuned for the other videos, those shorts that I mentioned. I hope to be putting out a bunch of those in the next couple of weeks. All right, moving on to the first of our time zones. What we're going to do in this new format is just go through all of the elections one by one, kind of like a calendar, talking about what's different about them, the astrological conditions and so forth, and then move on to the next time zone. First election of 2024 in the PST time zone occurs on the 2nd of the month, around 4:30 in the morning, under a waning moon in the 14th Lunar Mansion, Alsemuk. In this election, which is a malefic election, we also have a malefic astrological configuration, and Alsemuk is most notably used for separation and the destruction of harvests. The astrological configuration is that the moon conjuncts the midheaven while square Mars. The second election in Q1 occurs on the 8th, around 9 a.m. in the morning, with a waning moon conjunct the midheaven and also Venus in the 20th lunar mansion Al-Nam, which is famous for hunting and also making men come where you wish. And the conjunction with Venus, I think, aligns well with making men come where you wish in a sort of attracting sense, and potentially also with hunting in terms of Al-Nam's Beastmaster vibes, playing off of the Venusian earthy qualities and magnetic attraction. This is unfortunately happening under a waning moon, however, so the effects aren't going to be as strong, or they may be delayed. Our next election takes place on the 12th at 1 p.m., when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven while also sextiling Venus and the North Node in the 25th lunar mansion. The 25th lunar mansion is named Al-Sad Al-Aqbiya, and it is associated with securing buildings, safely conveying messages, and typically protection, but this is taking place under a waxing moon, so its protective vibes, I think, aren't as strong in this condition. However, the securing buildings and safely conveying messages should fit very neatly in this time. Our next election takes place on the 13th of January around 8:30 in the morning, when the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Mercury in the 26th lunar mansion Al-Farg Al-Awal. This mansion is known for creating love, enabling safe travel, and strengthening buildings. The sextile to Mercury isn't overly powerful, but this is a very benefic mansion, which is taking place under a waxing moon. And what Mercury does most is align with the energies of the sign that it occupies and the planets that it's aligned with. So in this case, it is sextile the moon, and so taking on some of her characteristics in this arrangement, and also it is ruled by Saturn by virtue of its placement. On the 16th of the month, around 4:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and the North Node in the first lunar mansion in Aries. And Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars currently occupies Capricorn, where it is exalted. So the ruler of the moon is exalted and giving a boost of strong, aggressive energy to this mansion, which is already a forceful, aggressive place. It is good for beginning journeys or adventures and taking medicines under a waxing moon. Under a waning moon, this is a very destructive mansion, good for destroying cities and winning victories and so forth. But under a waxing moon, we lean into its positive aspects, and thus this is good for beginning a journey, an adventure, or a conquest. Then on the 18th at 11:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant while trine Mars in the third lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya. The third lunar mansion, or Al-Thuraya, is famously associated with prosperity and safe travel at sea because of its heliacal rise and setting each year at the beginning and the ending of both the planting and harvesting seasons, and also the safe sailing season, basically the summertime. So this is a very prosperous place, and the moon is waxing well in this mansion, and also trine Mars, who is currently exalted in Capricorn. So there's a lot of powerful, fiery energy combined with the earthy energy of Taurus, which is where this moon occupies. Next, on January 19th, around 7 p.m., the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the sun in the fifth lunar mansion, Al-Haka, which is known for learning skills, safe travels, friendship, and favor from authority. The trine to the sun is particularly beneficial for favor from authority workings because the sun is associated with vitality and confidence and being seen, as well as rulership. Next, on the 22nd, around 2:20 p.m., the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Jupiter while trine Saturn in the 8th lunar mansion, Al-Nathra, which is good for victory, safe travel, and friendship under a waxing moon. The sextile with Jupiter is not incredibly powerful, but Jupiter as a greater benefic does align well with these outcomes of victory and making friends and so forth. Then just after midnight on the morning of the 26th, the now waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the North Node in the 11th lunar mansion, Al-Zubra, which is good for glory, favor from authority, and just generally success of any kind. The North Node is a powerful ally, particularly in lunar mansion magic, that will add a certain kind of hunger or a big boost of power. And on the 28th, around 8 p.m., the waning moon will conjoin the ascendant while trine Mercury and Mars in the 13th lunar mansion, Al-Awa, which is good for potency, as in sexual potency, growth, and prosperity of various forms. This is a very benefic mansion with no real malefic qualities. So even though it's under a waning moon, the effects can be expected to be benefic in nature. The trine to Mercury and Mars, which are conjoined in the sky, adds both a quickness and a power to this working, and probably a heat or a sense of sexual urgency or arousal to any workings that are of that nature. And then on the 29th, around 2:20 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines Mercury in the 14th lunar mansion Alcemic, and a sign that is also ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is the dispositor of the moon and doubly powerful in this sense. In this particular situation, with this configuration and under a waning moon, the best way to use Alcemic is for healing. And with the alignment with Mercury, even more so because Mercury is related to health and medicine and so forth. And the 31st, about 3:40 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven while also square Mars and opposite the north node, creating a very malefic set of conditions in the 16th lunar mansion Alzubana, which is in this situation best for disrupting the competition, impeding travel, and causing hatred. This is a great mansion under a waxing moon for prosperity workings and so forth, but this would be a very dangerous time to attempt that working. So think actually about harming your competition in some kind of way if you're going to use this mansion. But this is a very, very malefic working, so beware. And a little bit later on the 31st, around 10:40 p.m., another opportunity in the 16th mansion is available with the waning moon conjoin the ascendant and square Mercury now, for all the same purposes, but just a little bit less powerful. Now moving into February, on the 3rd of the month, just before 6 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven while sextile Mercury and Mars in the 18th lunar mansion Al-Khalib. And Mars is occupying Capricorn at this time and is exalted in that position and is the dispositor of the moon in this mansion. So this working would get a boost in aggressive or powerful energy. And this mansion is used for removing fevers and stomach pains and for gaining protection from serpents and other venomous pests. Then on the 6th of the month, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines Jupiter while sextile Saturn in the 22nd lunar mansion Al-Sad al-Dabi, good for curing illness. So this benefic configuration with the trine to Jupiter and the sextile to Saturn isn't really viable for a malefic working, which would be more appropriate under a waning moon like this one. But the curing of illness is sort of a removal of something, and so it fits into the category of something that would go under a waning moon as well. So much like the mansion a few back, this one really should just be used for healing purposes in this configuration in February. Then on the 12th, around 8:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant in the first lunar mansion Al-Sharatain. Now, normally to be included in this guide, an election that I feature has to include an aspect to another planet that's somehow supportive, like a sextile or a trine in a positive working, or a square or an opposition in a negative working. But there are no such aspects in this case. The reason that I'm including it is because the ruler of Aries, in this case, the moon's dispositor, is exalted in Capricorn. And I think that that's actually going to be strong enough because it boosts the power of the moon itself. And so I'm including this one in the first lunar mansion, good for beginning journeys or adventures and taking medicines, with just the power of Mars as the fuel or fire for this working. And also on the 12th, a little later in the day at about 2:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Mercury in the first lunar mansion. So at this point, this one would be a little bit better than the one before because we do have the sextile to Mercury, but everything else is still in effect. Like the moon is ruled by its dispositor, Mars, in Capricorn where it's exalted. So that's in effect for both of those, obviously, but the latter one is just a little bit better because we do have that sextile to Mercury boosting the election. And then on the 13th, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and the north node while sextile the sun in the second lunar mansion, Al-Butane. Al-Butane is said to allow for the removal of anger, which I put here as reconciliation, and to gain favor from authorities and to find hidden treasures. The conjunction to the north node here gives us a powerful ally to boost the election, and then the sextile to the sun particularly fits with the favor from authority and reconciliation workings by making him more visible and likable and so on. Next, we skip ahead all the way to March 8th, when just before 5 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and Venus in the 26th lunar mansion, Al-Farg al-Awal, for love, friendship, and safe travel. Despite the fact that the moon is waning in this mansion, It is an all benefic mansion. It has no real negative qualities, nothing that really works under a waning moon. And so in an all benefic mansion like this, I tend to think that it's just a little bit less powerful and maybe a little bit delayed when it happens under a waning moon. But the conjunction with Venus is a perfect fit for this friendship and love vibe of the 26th lunar mansion. Then on the 11th of March, around 7:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and the north node in the first lunar mansion in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, now in Aquarius. So it lacks that exalted Mars boost of the prior month, but you still have a powerful partner in the north node. Then a little bit later on the 11th, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and the north node while sextile Mars in a sign ruled by Mars, still in Aries. This time now in the second lunar mansion, Albutane, which provides favor from authority, hidden treasures, and reconciliation. Now on the 12th, we have a repeat of that at 8:20 in the morning when the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Venus in the second lunar mansion. And the sextile to Venus, I think, pairs very well with the reconciliation and the favor from authority by making you more likable, essentially. Next on the 14th, at 9:40 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles the sun in the fifth lunar mansion, Al-Haka. Al-Haka is known for providing favor from authority, the ability to learn skills quickly, and for safe travel. The sextile with the sun, I think in particular, leans in again to the recognizability, to being seen, so to speak, which helps with favor from authority workings. Then middle of the month on the 15th, about 5:40 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles the north node in the sixth lunar mansion, Al-Hana, which provides fast friends and improves one's skill or luck with hunting. Now moving on to EST time zone. On the 2nd of January at about 4:30 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven while square Mars in the 14th lunar mansion of Alsemach, which is good for separation and destruction of harvests under a waning moon in these conditions. And this is a malefic election, so we see the square to Mars and the waning moon, and that's the kind of pairing that we're looking for when we're trying to do some kind of destruction or destructive activity. Then on the 6th, around 7:15 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles the sun in the 18th lunar mansion, Al-Kalib, which is good for protection from serpents and other forms of venomous pests and insects and such, and also driving away fevers. The sextile to the sun is useful for protection. You can imagine kind of shining a light on something and sending all the venomous animals scurrying, and for reducing fever in terms of the sun's like healing and vitality increasing powers. On the 8th, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and also Venus in the 20th lunar mansion, Al-Nam, which is good for hunting and making men come where you wish, meaning like attracting them to a particular place. So this could be used with a conjunction with Venus for attracting friends or clients, getting people to come to your location or something like that. But this is under a waning moon, so it's not likely to be as powerful or happen as quickly as it might under a waxing moon. On the 12th, just before 1 p.m., the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Venus and also the north node in the 25th lunar mansion, Al-Sad Al-Aqbiya, which under a waxing moon is good for securing buildings and safely conveying messages. Then on the 13th at 8:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Mercury in the 26th lunar mansion, Al-Farg Al-Awal, for the creation of love, safe travel, and strengthening buildings. This is more or less a mansion for love. On the 16th of January, around 4:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven in the first lunar mansion. Now, normally, I would require there to be some kind of an aspect with another planetary body boosting the election, but in this case, what we're working with is the moon's dispositor, or the ruler of the sign that the moon is in the sign where it is exalted. So Mars is in Capricorn, where it's exalted, and this adds a powerful boost to the moon by virtue of the dispositor passing on its power to the moon in that sign. So in this case, I'm going to include this election in the guide, even though it doesn't have some kind of a boosting aspect to like Jupiter or Venus or something like that. Also on the 16th, later in the afternoon, we have another opportunity in the first lunar mansion around 4:30 in the afternoon when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven in this mansion once again. And again, still no additional aspects. So these are equivalent elections just earlier or later in the day. Then on the 18th at 11:18 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and also Jupiter while trine Mercury and Mars, and also sextile to Saturn in the third lunar mansion, Althariya. This is really probably the best election maybe of the quarter, certainly in January. I love the third lunar mansion. This is a really good example of one too. We have a lot of benefic aspects in place. We've got the conjunction with Jupiter, the greater benefic. We have a trine to both Mercury and Mars, and then a sextile to Saturn. So you've got pretty much the majority of the traditional planets in the sky aligned in favor of an already very prosperous mansion under a waxing moon. And in this mansion, you can accomplish really any good acts. It allows for the acquisition of good things, it says in the Picatrix, but you can sort of take that to mean prosperity. It's also famous for safe traveling, particularly at sea, and success in works of alchemy and fire. Then on the 19th at 7 in the evening, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven while trine the sun in the fifth lunar mansion, Alhaka, which is good for learning skills, safe travels, friendship, and favor from authority. Particularly with the trine to the sun, both friendship and favor from authority type workings will get a boost because of the sun's power of helping one be seen, get noticed. Just after midnight on the morning of the 26th, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the north node in the 11th lunar mansion, Al-Zubra, for glory, favors from authority, and success. The north node is always a strong, powerful ally in lunar mansion workings. Then around 7:45 in the evening on the 28th, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and trines Mercury and also Mars in the 13th lunar mansion, Al-Awa. Good for potency, specifically sexual potency, growth, and prosperity of various forms. Now, this is taking place under a waning moon, but this is one of those mansions where everything, all of its qualities are all benefic, it's all positive. So there really aren't any kind of negative effects that one has to worry about, and you can do a positive working under a waning moon. It just won't be as strong or happen as quickly as it might under a waxing moon. Then to close out the month, on the 31st at around 3:45 in the afternoon, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and squares Mars while opposite the north node in the 15th lunar mansion, Al-Ghafir, which in this condition, which is extremely malefic, can be used for impeding journeys, creating separation and discord among people. Then later on the 31st, about 10:30 at night, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and squares Mercury, again in the 15th lunar mansion, Al-Ghafir, for the same purposes of impeding journeys, creating separation and discord. The only difference here is that it lacks the opposition to the north node, so while this is plenty malefic enough, if you wanted a really, really bad one, a really nasty election, it's the one just before. Now moving into February, on the 3rd of the month, just before 6 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Mercury and Mars in the 18th lunar mansion, Al-Khalib. Al-Khalib occupies the latter half of Scorpio and is thus essentially ruled by Mars, and Mars is currently located in Capricorn where it is exalted. So this gets a boost to its fiery potential for protection in particular, but this is also used for removing fevers and stomach pains. So I like the sextile to Mercury a little bit for the healing aspect of it, and obviously the sextile to exalted Mars as a boost for its protective potential. Next, on the 12th of February at about 2:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Mercury in the first lunar mansion. Good for beginning journeys and taking medicines under this waxing moon. This first lunar mansion is typically a malefic one used for destruction and victory in battle and so forth, but with this kind of a positive configuration under a waxing moon, its sort of secondary qualities take front stage. Next, on the 13th, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and the north node in the second lunar mansion, Al-Butane. Al-Butane is good for reconciliation, and it says in the Picatrix, the removal of anger specifically, and favor from authority, because it speaks to removing anger from a king or a high official so that you can do business with them again. And then also for revealing hidden treasures in the earth. And a conjunction to the north node is always a powerful boost to any lunar mansion ritual. Now, skipping ahead essentially a month, we get all the way to the 11th of March, back around again to the first lunar mansion, at about 7:45 in the morning with the waxing moon conjoin the ascendant and the north node in this mansion. This, as we were just speaking about, is good for beginning journeys, taking medicines, and winning victories. And with the boosting power of the conjunction with the North Node in this election, this one is significantly superior to the one back on the 12th of February. We have another one of these elections a little bit later on the 11th, around 2 p.m., when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and the North Node in the first lunar mansion. Good again for beginning journeys, taking medicines, and winning victories. Now moving on to the 12th of March, around 8:15 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Venus in the second lunar mansion, Al-Butane. As we were just saying, this is good for reconciliation, favor from authority, and finding hidden treasures. The sextile with Venus obviously aligns it well with reconciliation, smoothing things over, and then appealing to authority and gaining their favor. On the next day, the 13th, around 8:45 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and also Jupiter, while sextile Saturn in the third lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya. This isn't quite as good as the one back in January, but we still have a lot of positivity here. We have a conjunction with Jupiter and a sextile to Saturn, both positive aspects, and then it's also taking place once again under a waxing moon. So this is good for prosperity or the attraction of good things, harvests, travel on the sea, and creating friendship. Then wrapping up the month and also the quarter, we have on the 19th of March, around 1:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoining the midheaven and trining the sun in the 10th lunar mansion. 10th lunar mansion, particularly under a waxing moon, is good for healing, creating love, building allies, and strengthening buildings. And the trine with the sun is particularly well aligned with workings for healing and creating allies. First election of 2024 in CET time zone starts at 4:30 in the morning on the 2nd of January, when the waning moon conjoins the midheaven while square Mercury and also Mars in the 14th lunar mansion, Al-Samak. A very malefic configuration in a fairly destructive mansion, in this case used for separation and the destruction of harvests. On the 6th, around 7:20 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles the sun in the 18th lunar mansion, Al-Khalib, which is good for protection, particularly from serpents and other venomous pests, insects, and so on, and driving away fevers. And I think the sextile with the sun aligns with both protection and driving away fevers. Protection, obviously, like the sun shining its light down and scaring away all the little critters, and driving away fevers in terms of sun's, healing and vitality boosting powers. Then on the 13th, a little after 9 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles the powerful North Node in the 25th lunar mansion, Al-Sad al-Aqbiya, for securing buildings and safely conveying messages. This is mostly a malefic mansion and is usually used for protective purposes, but that would be under a waning moon, and we're under a waxing moon now, and also with a positive aspect, the sextile to the North Node. So in this case, it fits better with Al-Sad al-Aqbiya's more positive qualities. On the 18th of January, a little before 11:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and Jupiter while trine Mercury and sextile Saturn in the third lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya. This is a really great Al-Thuraya election, and Al-Thuraya is a very positive mansion which originally hosted the Pleiades, associated with prosperity, safe travel at sea, increasing harvests, works of alchemy and fire, and other positive outcomes. This might be the very best election of the quarter, and is certainly the best example of an Al-Thuraya election that we've seen in a while. On the 28th of January, a little after 7:30 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and trines Mercury and Mars in the 13th lunar mansion, Al-Awa, known for increasing potency, particularly sexual potency, increasing growth, and prosperity in various forms. The trine to Mercury is great because Mercury is currently the dispositor of the moon, and a trine to Mars is excellent because the sort of fiery sexual power of Al-Awa is boosted by Mars while it's currently in Capricorn and exalted. On the 31st, around 10:45 p.m., the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and squares Mercury and Mars in the 16th lunar mansion, Al-Zubana. Now, this would typically be under a waxing moon and a better, more benefic set of astrological conditions, prosperity election and a mercantile election for like increasing buying and selling and for safe travel and so forth. But it inverts under a waning moon, and particularly when we have this kind of a very malefic configuration with the two squares, and it turns it to an opportunity to disrupt the competition. So rather than improving your own condition, you disrupt your competition by impeding travel, causing hatred between people, and the destruction of goods and so forth. Moving into February, on the 3rd of the month, just before 6 o'clock in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Mars in the 18th lunar mansion, Al-Khalib. Despite being only a sextile, the aspect to Mars is very powerful because Mars rules Scorpio, and Al-Khalib is primarily in Scorpio. And Mars, as it is currently in Capricorn and exalted, is especially powerful in this context. This mansion is good for removing fevers and stomach pains, and for protection from serpents and other venomous creatures. On the 13th of February, just before 9 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant in the north node, while sextile Mercury in the first lunar mansion, Al-Sharatain, which is good for beginning journeys and taking medicines under this waxing moon. This mansion is typically used for destruction and for conquest and so forth. It's typically a very aggressive mansion, but under a waxing moon and with a positive aspect to Mercury, it doesn't serve those purposes, so it will focus on its more benefic qualities. Now jumping all the way to March 1st, just before midnight, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and squares Venus in the 19th lunar mansion, Al-Shala, which is known for causing blood to flow, destruction, and expelling people from a place. This is obviously a very malefic election. Then on the 11th of March, around 1 p.m., the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and the north node in the first lunar mansion, Al-Sharatain. Again, back to this idea of beginning journeys and taking medicines. And this time I added in winning victories because it is also conjunct to the north node, which gives it an extra boost of power. But this is still under a waxing moon, so not to be used for malefic or destructive purposes. Then on the 13th of March, just before 8 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Saturn in the third lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya. Now, this isn't quite as good as the Al-Thuraya election that we had back in January, but it's still a pretty good one. We have a waxing moon, and we have a benefic connection to Saturn. And as before, this mansion is associated with attracting good things, creating prosperity, increasing harvests, traveling safely on the sea, and creating friendship and love. There's a second election for this mansion a little bit later in the day, around 2:50 p.m., when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and Jupiter and sextile Saturn. So this one is noticeably better because a conjunction to Jupiter is present in addition to the sextile to Saturn, which boosts the prosperity and growth qualities of this mansion. Finally, the last election of the quarter occurs on March 19th, just after 12 p.m., when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the sun in the 10th lunar mansion, Al-Jabah, which is good for healing, creating love, binding allies together, and strengthening buildings. The trine with the sun is particularly useful in workings having to do with healing for its powers of vitality, and love and allyship for its helping one be seen and appreciated. And now for AET time zone. The first election of the quarter is on the 2nd of January at 10:30 p.m. when the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and squares Mars in the 14th lunar mansion, Al-Samuk, which is good for separation and destruction of harvests here under this waning moon. Then on the 13th, just after 6 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Venus in the 25th lunar mansion, Al-Sad Al-Aqbiya, which is normally a protective mansion and something of a malefic mansion, but in this case, under the waxing moon and with this positive sextile to Venus, can be used for securing buildings and safely conveying messages. A second election in this mansion occurs just a little bit later in the afternoon, about 1 o'clock, when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Venus, and now also the north node. The extra sextile to the north node adds a powerful benefic boost to this version of the election, so this would be the better of the two if you have the opportunity to choose. Then on the 17th, a little after 10:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and the north node in the first lunar mansion. The first lunar mansion is in Aries and therefore ruled by Mars, and Mars is currently in Capricorn where it's exalted. So the dispositor of the moon, the planet that rules the sign that the moon currently occupies, is exalted and therefore is extra powerful and bringing a boost of aggressive energy to any workings in this mansion. And workings in this mansion under a waxing moon are most aligned with the opportunity to begin journeys or start adventures and to take medicines. Then a little later in the day on the 17th, around 4:40 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and also the north node while trine Venus in the second lunar mansion, Al-Butane, which is good for favor from authority, reconciliation, and finding hidden treasures. Obviously, the conjunction with the north node brings a powerful boost of energy, and the trine to Venus helps with favor from authority and reconciliatory workings in particular. Next, on the 20th, a little after 1:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and trines the sun in the 5th lunar mansion, Al-Haka, good for learning skills, safe travels, friendship, and favor from authority workings. The trine to the sun is particularly aligned with the opportunities for creating friendship and for gaining favor from authority based on its ability to help one be recognized and seen. Also on the 20th, a little later in the day, around 7 o'clock in the evening, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the sun, again in the 5th lunar mansion for learning, safe travels, friendship, and favor from authority. Next, on the 26th, around 6:45 in the evening, the waning moon conjuncts the ascendant and trines the north node in the 11th lunar mansion, Al-Zubra, good for glory, favor from authority, and generally success. And the trine with the north node adds a boost of power to workings in this mansion. On the 29th, around 1:45 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines Mercury and also Mars in the 13th lunar mansion, Al-Awa, good for potency, specifically sexual potency, and growth and various forms of prosperity. The trine to both Mercury and Mars bring two different kinds of energy that are useful in this mansion because Mercury is the dispositor of the moon, and the heat of Mars pairs well with the sexual energy of this mansion. Also on the 29th, around 8:30 in the evening, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and trines Mercury in now the 14th lunar mansion, Alcimic. The trine with Mercury is fortunate because the moon's dispositor in this mansion is also Mercury, and so this benefic configuration aligns this mansion more with healing than the destructive qualities of Alcimic earlier in the month. To close out January, on the 31st, around 9:30 in the evening, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant while square Mars and opposite the north node in the 16th lunar mansion, Al-Zubana, which would typically be a mercantile mansion of positive things like increasing profit and creating prosperity, but because the moon is waning and we have a square to Mars and an opposite to the north node, the malefic configuration here is best for use of disrupting the competition, impeding travel, and causing hatred and strife between people. Early in the morning on the next day, on the 1st of February, around 3:45 a.m., the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and squares Mercury and Mars, while also opposite the north node, still in the 16th lunar mansion, Al-Zubana. The difference here is that we also have a square to Mercury in addition to Mars and the opposition with the north node. Of the two, this is the stronger and therefore nastier of the two elections. On the 11th of February, a little after 12:45 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles Jupiter in the 27th lunar mansion, Alfarg Althani, which is also ruled by Jupiter, so this sextile is extra benefic in nature. And this mansion can be used for increasing merchandise and harvests and healing illnesses. On the 13th of February, a little after 8:30 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Mercury in the 1st lunar mansion, Al-Sharatane, good for beginning journeys, starting adventures, and taking medicines. Mars is in Capricorn where it's exalted, and Mars rules Aries where this mansion occupies. And therefore, the exaltation of Mars adds an extra boost of fiery, martial energy to the moon in this mansion. A little later in the day, around 2:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and the north node, while sextile Mercury in the 1st lunar mansion. So with the addition of the conjunction to the north node, this is the more powerful of the two elections. On the 19th, just before 2:30 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Jupiter while trines Saturn in the 8th lunar mansion, Al-Nathra, good for victory, safe travel, and friendship. This election repeats a little later in the day, around 7:45 in the afternoon, when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and also sextiles Jupiter and trines Saturn in the 8th lunar mansion. On the 22nd, a little after 10:15 p.m., the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and trines the north node in the 11th lunar mansion, Al-Zubra, good for glory, prosperity, and favor from authority. Now moving into March. On the 1st of the month, around 9:10 p.m., the waning moon conjoins the ascendant while square Venus in the 18th lunar mansion, Al-Kalib. Al-Kalib under a waning moon and with a square to Venus is prime for Al-Kalib's more negative qualities, such as protection magic, or to invite vengeance upon one's enemies. On the 8th of the month, around 2:30 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and Mars while square Jupiter and sextile the north node in the 25th lunar mansion, Al-Sad Al-Aqbiya. With a malefic configuration like this, under a waning moon, this mansion is best used for destructive acts like taking revenge, binding the body from functioning, and then also potentially the protection of crops. On the 9th of the month, around 3:40 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the ascendant and also Venus in the 26th lunar mansion, Al-Farag al-Awal, good for love, friendship, and safe travel. Despite the fact that this mansion is taking place under a waning moon, we don't have to fear any negative outcomes because there really aren't any negative qualities of this mansion. It has no malefic uses. So we can continue to feel confident in making images and talismans for love, friendship, and safe travel, and making use of this lovely conjunction with Venus. On the 13th, a little after 8 o'clock in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles Venus in the 3rd lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya, good for prosperity, harvests, travel on the sea, and friendship and love. The sextile to Venus pairs well with workings for prosperity, increasing harvests, and creating friendship and love. On the 16th, around 11:20 in the morning, the waxing moon conjoins the ascendant and sextiles the north node in the 6th lunar mansion, Al-Hana, good for creating friendships, and particularly fast friendships given the sextile with the hungry north node, and improving skill or luck with hunting. And this same election repeats a little later in the day around 4:45 in the afternoon when the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and sextiles the north node, again in the 6th lunar mansion. On the 17th of March, around 5:40 in the afternoon, the waxing moon conjoins the midheaven and trines Venus in the 7th lunar mansion, Aldira. Aldira can be used for the acquisition of all good things, for safe travel, increase of various forms, and creating friendship. And the trine with Venus particularly supports attracting good things relating to material, wealth, comfort, and so on, and obviously friendship and love. Then on the 28th of March, a little after 1:15 in the morning, the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and trines Mars in the 17th lunar mansion, Al-Iqal. And given the fact that we have a trine to Mars and this mansion is also ruled by Mars, this martial energy is probably best suited to protection. Then the last election of the quarter takes place on the 30th of March around 2:40 in the morning when the waning moon conjoins the midheaven and squares Mars in the 19th lunar mansion, Al-Shala, which is a very malefic election aligned with creating destruction and expelling people from places, which is a bit of a heavy note to end on, but here we are. That wraps up the Q1 2024 Lunar Mansion Guide. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some dates and times that you're excited about in that long list of talisman quality lunar mansion elections. There are so many good opportunities coming up, especially considered to the dry spell that we've just endured over the last 6 months of retrogrades, eclipses, and so on. So if you found this video useful, please click the like button so that YouTube knows that I'm doing good work here and shows this video to more people. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to drop by my website at www.postmugglism.com to find all the other content that I'm publishing, like articles, podcast episodes, other videos, and more. And if you have any questions about lunar mansions, astrological magic, or just magic in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on X as Postmugglism or by email at postmugglism@gmail.com. I love to hear stories about magic that you're performing using these mansions, what your personal experiences have been like with lunar mansion rituals and talismans, and your thoughts and theories on this fascinating magical system. So don't be shy. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, may the gods be with you.